I am Les Williams. I am 89 years old, and I'm a Tuskegee Airman. Most of my life centered around World War II. And in fact, at that time, I fought two wars. There was a war in Europe, in Japan, and then there was a war here in the United States, a domestic war. What I was fighting was entitled prejudice and discrimination. And no matter what happened in my life, there was always that presence of discrimination or similar activities that I had to cope with. I saw all of this prejudice, as did all of my fellow cadets, going on. I said, don't worry, all the United States isn't like that. I said, you should have grown up in California. But I was wrong. There was a lot of prejudice in California. It was just a different kind. It was done in a different way. But I almost got lynched in California. I drove my family, which was my wife and my new daughter and myself, all the way from Ohio to San Mateo. And we'd get closer and closer to California and have to suffer being turned down by most of the motor courts or motels along the way. They wouldn't serve us. They wouldn't let us stay there. A lot of times we had to sleep in our car. I said, don't worry, we're going to California, we're going to be all right. We get to California, we get outside of Blythe, which is on the southern tip of California, and a place that I had already been. And I said, let's get a lunch and bring it to the car and eat in the car. And Blythe was the nearest place to do that. It didn't have that many stores, but it did have a hamburger store, and it was full because it was around lunch. The bar stools were not, they were empty. And so I sat there in my uniform and waited for my sandwiches, but I couldn't help but notice a man going from table to table in the dining room section and pointing his finger at me. And I noticed he did it to every table. He went to every table and pointed his finger at me, and he didn't have a pleasant look on his face either. So I said, I think trouble's on its way. And I said, I don't know how I can do this. I'm in an all-white town that some stores had signs in front of them saying no dogs or Indians allowed. And I guess they would have put the N-word there, but there was nobody in town of that race. He finally came up to the stool beside me on my right side, and I asked him, what's the matter? And he says, when you leave, I'm going to mess over you. And I says, what? I said, I don't even know you. You don't even know me. He said, don't worry, I'm going to get you. And then I noticed there was a whole bunch of people outside on the sidewalk looking through the window. And so I knew definitely something was wrong then. So I spun around on my stool and I faced this fellow, and he was on my right. He hadn't seen my wings, but when I turned around on my stool, he saw my wings. He says, oh, you're a pilot. I like pilots. I was kind of relieved, but I wasn't sure that he could get that message over to all these people that were looking at me from the dining room and from the sidewalk. And then he left, and I needed him to say, to say, look, I'm okay. But by that time, the people had already made up their minds. My hamburgers came, and I said, well, I don't have a weapon, but I'm going to put a salt and pepper shaker in each hand and hope that my knuckles will be hard enough to help me in this situation. So I got up, but the crowd hadn't changed. They were still very mean-looking and anxious. And I says, I've got to go through this crowd in the restaurant, and then I have to go out and go through the crowd on the sidewalk. So I started, and I made sure I didn't touch anybody. I didn't brush against them like the major in Freeman Field. And they would part very slowly. But nobody made a move. Nobody tried to hit me. But they parted very reluctantly, and they said, get him, he's getting away. Don't let him get away. You're letting that nigga get away. And I didn't have far to go, but it was like 1,000 miles just to get to that door, from that door to my car door. But I did make it. Nobody made a move. I certainly didn't make a move. I got in the car and I was gone. And of course, you can imagine what my wife said at the right time. Not at that time. Says, "Oh yeah, California's a nice place to be."